Hey everybody, how you doing? It's me, Leslie, the little Plazic. Zazoo Plazz here for my Sunday Zazoo Plazz report. It's 2/22. 26. And apparently there's going to be some cyclone bomb blizzard. If I were to go by all the threatening weather videos that are on YouTube, sometimes when I wake up, and I get up. Lately, I tend to wake up late evening, and I get up around 2 a.m. Bear with me. That's a Plazz report. First Sunday of Lent. It's going to be a good one. I got my snake shirt. I'm a wood snake. 1965. And I put it on yesterday. Oh, I'm deviating again. I put it on yesterday. I said, I just want to wear my snake shirt. And then I found out today's the reading about the Garden of Eden with the snake. I did some posts on Facebook yesterday about maple syrup season and tapping trees. And it's all about the Garden of Eden and the tree of good and evil. And my kid, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, how I get up at 2 in the morning. I'll talk about that first. And then, because I find that I get insights in the middle of the night when she's sleeping, everybody's sleeping, and it's quiet, and there's none of this, because I pick up on energy, and I get the purest energy, early in the morning like that. I get up, I do a few tarot cards, get going, have my tea, do my workout, my yoga. These are all things that snakes should do, We have to be careful about our constitution, we have to watch what we eat, kind of, I was doing research on snakes, and we shouldn't eat asparagus, which is interesting because it's shaped like a snake, isn't it? But I don't know. It's a cannibalism? I don't know. Anyway, it's going to be a good one because we're in Pisces season. So what happened was, I'll just, this is how I roll over here. Tell a few funny stories, talk about my life a little bit. Oh yeah, my son said they tap the trees up near where he is at UCONN. Yes, no, I don't get it. I got all my food end of last week. The only thing I gotta go out and do is my laundry. Because, it's gonna be blowing and stuff, and I don't want to get blown around. It's just one load this week. It's not a big deal. So anyway, I was waking up. It was like the middle of the evening. I was still kind of sleeping, kind of waking up. And all of a sudden, my doorbell rings. Now, my doorbell never rings. It reminds me of that Sebastian Maniscalco routine where he says, your doorbell rings today? Your mother's crawling on her, doing the army crawl across the living room. Just that whole routine about, back when you were kids, or like in the 90s or 80s, we got people. When the doorbell rang, all the kids would slide up to the door in their socks. I love that. Your mom, she's got a little Entenmann's. Yes, she put it on the table. Here you go. I hope to God somebody comes over so you can cut up the cake. Little sanga. Those crap muffins are for you people. All of our mothers did that. My mother used to do that. She used to buy those Entenmann's coffee cakes, just in case somebody stopped by. I remember her, putting it off to the side. There was a side counter for coffee cakes and stuff. Or in her case, sometimes she had this chair, and my dad still has the damn chair. She used to have a chair in the kitchen, that she'd put stuff on. She'd put like magazines or something, but because we didn't have any pets now, she'd put her coffee cake on the chair, or we had a hutch, she'd clear away a little spot on the hutch next to the bananas for the cake, you know, or maybe even up on the, there was a special spot for the cake, you know, and God help you, God forbid, you take the cake. Oh, you take the cake. I was born on Marie Antoinette's birthday. You know, this is going to be very interesting. Stick with me today. Some pearls of wisdom. God help you if you cut into the cake and it wasn't time. It wasn't the right time, you know. Because, maybe somebody would stop by, my aunt and my cousins, they live the next street over. So sometimes, they'd stop by in the course of a week. Neighbors would come by. This doesn't happen anymore. Oh, so anyway. So, well, it was going to be good. So my doorbell rings, and not just like, I'm thinking, okay, I didn't leave my lights on in the car. It's not my neighbor, because she would have let me know, if that was the case, if something was going on. My first thought was, well, maybe it's my neighbor, and she needs help, or somebody needs help. So, and then the knocking, loud, bang, bang, bang. I'm like, that doesn't sound like my neighbor. Usually she goes knock, 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 Or if it was a social call, somebody would tentative, This was a bang, bang, bang. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Sprang out of bed, threw on my sweatpants and my robe. I go out, turn the light on, I got one of those peephole, I got a side window. I got a peephole, but I have one of those open, long side windows that I don't cover because I like to look out at the trees. So there's a town cop, standing outside, a middle-aged guy, young to middle-aged, maybe in his 30s. He's standing out there with his uniform and his big flashlight. He's like, I said, oh, hi. I'm thinking, what did I do? My brain, foggy from sleep is racing, thinking of why this police officer might be standing on my porch at 9:00 at night on a Saturday. I'm like, I don't think I did. It is my Catholic school brain said, what did I do? I'm thinking, I haven't had that much fun to justify it. Because I definitely would remember, if I had done something, But anyway, I was just here. I don't, I was working. I've been working at keeping my nose to the grindstone, and then my next thought was something's wrong with my car. My car is burst into flames, or somebody ran into my car, or something, right? Or there's something, on my plate, going on my place. It's something, somebody's, in the bushes or spying on me or doing something to my apartment. So, putting the evil eye on me. So, he says, oh, no. I said, everything okay, officer? Because you get defensive like that, right? And he says, oh, yeah. He said, I just, there's a Massachusetts car parked next to the spot, next to my spot. And he said, we got a medical alarm that went off, and it's for somebody from Massachusetts, maybe somebody who's visiting, somebody who lives here. And I said, sometimes I do see a Ford car, with Mass plates. They park in different spots. So maybe it's somebody's elderly parents or something. He said, they had one of those medical things, I've fallen and I can't get up, those things that they used to advertise when we were growing up. I'm not laughing because of that. The commercial was a big, it's some lady. She was an actress. But it was so unnerving to me to see that poor woman, and it would fill you with fear, at your own grandparents. It was my grandparents, or any Gen Xers who have, had parents now, since we're older, our parents are older, who've gone through that whole thing. We all thought of that commercial, because they had these things that you could, if your parent was living alone and they were, had a health condition, they could, I think my mother-in-law actually, I think my ex gave one to my mother-in-law when she was living alone, because she had, for a while, she would fall, or she had some health issues, that he wanted to make sure she'd be safe. So I think he did give her one of those, but something happened and she didn't use it right, or I don't know, something. There was always something with her and technology. He would bang his head against the wall, poor guy, trying to make things easier for her, get her a clapper, so that, because she had trouble with she would call up and say that she was less upset. God bless my mother-in-law. She was less upset about times that she felt, because she was fine. She had angels with her. She would bounce back. But the things that she was most upset about was that she couldn't turn on the TV. The little things were the big things, and the big things were the little things, because she was a woman of faith. So, but, this is where a lot of my humor comes in, because when you look back, you say, it's funny. It wasn't funny at the time, and I certainly don't mean to make light of it, but she had a way about her where she would get really upset about, it's kind of like the sliver versus the sliver in your finger versus like, the big gash or the big, plague or whatever. Anyway, that's a little aside there. So, I said, well, I racked my brain. I said, sorry, officer, I can't, I wish I could help you more. He said, oh, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And then he was gone. But I said, sometimes things like this happen. And I wonder, because I'm weird that way. I wonder if it was really what really happened. Was this an angel or something, or, some kind of visitor? Because you never know. Some weird things have happened to me since I've been here. Like homeless guys living in the laundry room that start talking to me in the middle of the night. Just weird stuff. Anyway, okay. Is that enough wasting time? Get to the Bible, Zazoo. Okay, get to the Bible. I'm a martyr. If you follow human design, I'm a martyr heretic. So, the song, everything fits together. And I was raised Catholic, people. So apparently the guy who was the singer for today, well, it's a pop duo, right? And I woke up with the name of this group in my head. I've been doing some of those quizzes. Sometimes I wake up, I watch YouTube videos. And lately I've been addicted to these quizzes, these guys that do the quizzes. And so they give you so much time to answer, like 50 questions or 100 questions. And then a couple of times I've scored up to an Einstein category. So I'm pretty good. But, the Gen X music, I'm always 100%. It's like, come on, really? It's not even fun because it's too easy. But for some reason, I guess I was, watching one of those, and then I dozed off, and then I woke up, and all I could think of was Pet Shop Boys. I said, what the hell is the Pet Shop? Because there was one song from the trivia quiz that I thought was from the Pet Shop Boys, but I couldn't remember. So that's the group for the week, just to keep in mind. Okay, so here we go. Genesis. No, I didn't pick a Genesis song because I did a lot of Genesis recently. I don't, wanted to get away from it. And it's Pisces season, it's Pisces. Sun is in Pisces, the moon is in Taurus. Taurus has to do with the earth and the trees, and I guess kind of goes with the song. You know, Taurus is all about, ruled by Libra, right? Or Venus, I mean. It's, you know, earthly pleasures, sensual pleasures is Taurus. You know, kind of simple. You know, I have Taurus in my 8th house. I have Scorpio in the Taurus house and Taurus in the Scorpio house. And my 2nd and 8th houses are intercepted. That means they don't start and end in that house. You know, they start in another house. So they're not like fully contained. I think that's what it means to be intercepted. Anyway, they said the house that you have intercepted is a real, you know, place that you're going to be learning in this life. There's something focused there. So, let's see. We have Mercury, Venus, and Pisces. Mars still in Aquarius and Pluto. Jupiter's in Cancer still. Saturn and Neptune are conjunct at the beginning of Aries. I talked about that last week. My focus this week is going to be on the Pisces, because we got 3 planets in Pisces plus the node, North Node. So I'm going to, you know, and I was just thinking my cousin's 2 daughters, their birthdays are the 19th this week and the 23rd. They're going to be 32 and 35. So, that, I mean, like, I remember, you know, always them being little kids, like in the 90s, you know, they were at our wedding, you know. The one who's turning 35 was our flower girl. She was 4 at our wedding. So I'm like, oh my gosh, she's turning 35. But it's, you know, seems like yesterday. To me, the 90s were, you know, 10 years ago, right? I don't know. That's just my perception. It never seems to change as the years go by. The 90s is still like yesterday. It seems like after 2000, I have my perception of time just stopped. Anyway, yeah. So you know the Garden of Eden, right? You know, God made man out of clay and breathed, you know, into him. You know, it's kind of like Aries, right? Saturn, Aries at 0 degrees. It's kind of like, well, Saturn is, you know, when I think of these topics like sin, and, you know, it's the first Sunday of Lent. So Catholics, if you know Catholics, or you are or were Catholic, you know that sin is mentioned a lot, especially during Lent. You know, guilt is the sauce that runs through the stew of Catholicism. It said, you know, American runs on Duncan, Catholicism runs on guilt. And I had a lot of that thrown my way. Fire and brimstone was my upbringing, right? You know, my ex is his uncle, who celebrated our wedding mass, was a Franciscan priest. And he was a Pisces, March 1st. That's right. And Zazoo Plazz was born on, I launched the book on February 29th. So every year I kind of think of him because, you know, it's kind of the same day. Anyway, he made a joke. When we were at our wedding reception, everybody was, you know, sitting down, and he got up to say the grace. And he joked that in church, everybody looked like they were in a pious coma. You know, he was good. Such an intelligent man, you know. Holy faith, you know, he was, you know, full of faith and religious, but also spiritual in non-religious, non-dogmatic ways. Like I remember once when he was sick, we went to see him, in the hospital, and he had a tape recorder, and he was listening to, someone had given him a mantra to say, like a, like a Buddhist kind of chant, and I remember being surprised that he was into that stuff, but of course he was. And, and then I showed him an article I wrote for the local paper, and he said that I should keep writing. He said, this is, he made some kind of a comment about my writing that, he enjoyed it and he thought I should keep doing it, So, and he was a very well-read man, so he was worldly in certain ways, and beyond worldly in other ways, in a spiritual sense, So, and I think my ex-husband he was very close to his uncle, who was his mother's younger brother, so on his mother's side. And, I had been raised, it's funny, I want to talk about this. I didn't think I was going to talk about this, but I was raised Catholic school with fear, right? Father Murphy comes in, you stand up, the nuns were like, the Sister Dolores, it was pain. It was no pain, no gain. And you had to go to confession, that's it was a whole book. I'm going to keep writing about that. But, and then I met my husband, and he had this whole other concept of priest because his uncle was a priest, He wasn't so much raised in fear, but he said, they're just normal people. But that was not my experience, especially being a woman. And for him, it was easier to adjust, being a man, being male, it wasn't as big a deal, But as a woman, who, like I said, I'm a martyr heretic. So I would just be, curious and looking into all kinds of things and asking questions and be, told that I was, or feel like I was sinful, And if you have somebody like me, curious with a lust for life, who wants to explore and enjoy life, you were made to feel like, especially during Lent, you got to eat no meat on Fridays, Ash Wednesday, you got to fast, you got to, or else you're going to hell. Of course you're going to hell, right? And I had people all around me who made me feel that way. And it was reinforced. I was in a cage, right? So this was just a little side note. So this is where I'm coming from, right? And it was, for us early Gen Xers, born in, 65, 66, 67, somewhere in there, spirit, a sense of distance from God, from the divine, was part of our experience, part of our, karma, if you will, or what we came here to write, right? To find out about, and to become more conscious and become connected again to the divine, to source, okay? So, you got this tree with the snake, the tree of life in the middle of the garden, good and evil, that Eve tells the snake, which, by the way, okay, the tree of life, and the snake gets a bad rap, but it's meant to signify it was the 13th zodiac sign that people don't talk about, but not the devil. You always thought the snake was the devil. The snake is not the devil. It's the ego. It's sort of the guides waking our ego, playing with humans, right? Playing with our sense of pride and temptation and weakness, right? It's almost a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. It's the ego waking up to itself, right? It's the consequences of negative curiosity that gives you experience, right? So this is perfect. So, this is too complicated to go into in a short Zazoo report, but bear with me. So, the snake was said to be the most cunning animal, right? The most clever. It says to the woman, why, what did God say about this tree? She said, well, he said not to eat. You can eat of all the other trees, the fruit, but not this one particular tree, because you'll die, right? So the snake says, no, you're not going to die. Your eyes will be open to what the good and evil, which is really the duality of the earth plane, right? It's the symbolism of coming from a place where there's non-duality, right? Being able to see both sides of things and not attach judgment to either one, right? And that's how God sees. We're in this whole So she eats some. She gives some to Adam, and they both have to realize they need clothes. Sew some clothes, but the whole thing. It's a symbolism for us incarnating, coming from a perfect place, where we know that we are segments, aspects of God, to coming down and feeling that we are cut off, that God is there, right? God is up there. We have to pray to a separate God, right? But then we have Psalms here. Be merciful to the Lord, for we have sinned. It talks about asking for God's compassion, wash us from guilt, cleanse us from sin. So where sin is seen as distance from God, right? Like I said, being cast out of paradise is, being. It was the 3D realm. We're all born into this third dimensional realm. Everything's good or bad, and we had a very, it was an awakening, right? We're not in spirit floating around. We see ourselves as flawed, as separate, as other, right? So, it's a clean heart create for me, O God, and a steadfast spirit renew within me. I love that. Open my lips that my mouth may praise God. So this is all good stuff. This is my kind of stuff. And then Paul's letter to the Romans, he's talking about, Adam versus Jesus, the first man, and then the Jesus in the human form of Adam, but showing us what a healthy, fully conscious being would look like, how we are to be when we are fully conscious. In other words, we cleansed of all that earthly. I guess we all have some ego, but it's a sense of cleansing ourselves from all of these things that cloud our third eye. The veils. The earth is ascending to a higher plane. And the veils are falling off that used to cloud our consciousness, right? Our vision, our psychic, our sense, our sixth sense, as it were, whatever. It talks about one man disobeyed, Adam, and was introduced death and condemnation and all that yucky stuff, right? The muck. And then through another man's, Jesus, who obeyed, he freed us, right? He brought grace, righteousness, non-duality. That's the sense of being able to see that everything is connected and everything is whole, right? So then, Matthew 4. This is the reading where Jesus, he's in the desert for 40 days, and he doesn't have any can't order any DoorDash, right? So he's hanging out there, and he's hungry, right? No Uber Eats in the desert, folks. So the devil comes, and I think the devil is kind of like John Lovett, or the guy on SNL used to dress in that red suit with the horns. Right? He shows up, or like the little devil on my mother used to buy those little cans of deviled ham. And she used to make that for my lunch. But there was a little devil on there. And I'm like, Mom, why did you buy deviled ham? And then she'd make deviled eggs, right? Those filled eggs once in a while. And I'd say, Mom, am I going to go to hell if I eat deviled eggs? Anyway, that's just a little joke. It's just a joke. Okay. All right, Zazoo. Okay. No, you're not. No, I'm not. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So he's hungry. So the devil says, there's 3 temptations. Devil says, why don't you turn that stone? Yeah, if you're God, go, command the angels to turn the stone into bread, right? So you can eat. And Jesus says, no. Not by bread alone, but by the word of God do we live. That one. And then, he's up on the temple. He says, throw yourself off and the angels will catch you. He said, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. The 3rd one, he takes him up to the mountain. He says, be king of the world. Just worship me, and I'll give you everything. And Jesus is like, no, you only worship God, just the one God, right? So the devil takes off, and the angels come and, take care of Jesus. They knew he wasn't going to, do anything. But the story was told, right? So I could go into the symbolism, but I don't have time. I want to talk about the song. Yeah. So it's a sin. The Pet Shop Boys. It's a sin. Da, 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 da. Okay. So the video is there. It takes place in this dungeon, and there's like these torture devices. One guy's in a cage. There's fires everywhere. It's like hell. But then it's a great video. You love it. 1987. And then different images of sins pop up in the video. Like people eating too much, and this like sexy woman, and going with lipstick and everything. So it's obvious, that's a big one. And then there's and then money. Some guy with money coming out of his mouth. I don't know. And then people yawning, like you yawn in church. And then there's monks walking around. Not the monk, Adrian Monk from the show Monk. My in-laws, my in-laws used to call it the Monk. Did you watch The Monk tonight? That was a great show. His name was Monk. He wasn't a monk, but they used to call him the Monk. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, that's just a joke. I'm not dissing anybody. It's just a little joke, okay? So this song, the single was released June 15th, 1987. It was the lead single from their 2nd album, Actually, and Pet Shop Boys. It was actually written, I'll get into that in a minute. It went to #1 in the UK. Their 2nd #1 single #1 hit in the UK and 15 other countries in Europe and around. And it only got to #9 in the US. They did that song West Side Girls, the East End Boys, and something like that. But, okay, so it got to #9 in the US Billboard 100. But, she's going out, hacking outside. Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe co-wrote the song. In 1982 they wrote it. In 1984 they put it on their demo tape to send to New York to the record company, whatever. She's going out. I don't know. Taking her dog out. So it said Chris Lowe played the tune like a hymn, and it reminded Neil Tennant of his Catholic school days and how they used to preach, how if you're married, you're only supposed to, have, do it to make babies and that's it. A lot of, they used to preach about sexual activity to the kids when he was growing up. Now he was a boomer, so this was before. I don't ever remember them saying that word directly in my. We didn't have. I mean, it was implied, but it was very vague with us. Maybe because we're the Pluto and Virgo generation, but think of what we came of age. The end of the 80s was the AIDS crisis. It was Pluto and Scorpio, right? So these are the things. So he said that this song really was not meant to be taken that seriously, and he said it was a camp joke. But people, of course, took it seriously because it being the Pluto and Scorpio, decade or whatever. And he said a local priest in his town did a sermon on how the church supposedly changed from talking about the promise of hell if you fool around or whatever, to a message of love, right? So it was called theatrical. This song was called theatrical. She is so annoying because he actually uses part of the act of contrition in the lyrics. Overblown, synthesizers and everything. So, and then somebody did, so the school where he went took out an article in the local paper saying that, he shouldn't be ashamed of himself, or, accusing the school of that, and that, they didn't do any such thing. And so I guess, but they did it anonymously. Like, they didn't sign it or anything. They kind of just, attacked him. And so it made his parents very embarrassed, right? Because they were the older, more conservative generation, right? The greatest generation. So, and then this DJ, this is the last thing, this DJ accused them of plagiarizing the melody of Cat Stevens' 1971 song Wild World, which I can't see. So he covered the song with the similar to their musical arrangement to try to prove the point, to try to take them down, right? But the song flopped, and then they sued him because he used their music, right? So they ended up winning out of court, and they donated the money toward to support the study of sexually transmitted diseases. So they ended up coming out to all these people. If you're a heretic, right, martyr heretic, people go after you, like me. I don't go after. People go after us, accuse us of being heretics, right? But then in the end, we end up winning because we're supposed to speak out about things in a creative way. So I'll just leave that right there. Squeaky's up there. I'm going to go have my paleo hot chocolate now that I've earned it. which is healthy. And rice cake with the cashew butter. It's a very, very not holy. It's not too sinful. And I gotta go do my laundry before the bomb cyclone blizzard comes. So yeah, that's it for today. Got my St. Patty's decorations out. So I'll see you. 40 minutes again. That went by like that. So yep, I'm. I was gonna make jambalaya this week. So I'll see you next week. Everybody, stay warm and in the snow if you're having it. And yeah, you all listen to the Pet Shop Boys. I haven't heard them in a long time. But I'll be back next week, same place, different time. Take care. Bye-bye.